Hi, and welcome to UsingCoda.com's Getting Started with Coda series. Before we go any further with the basics, I wanted to show you some of the advanced things you can do with lookups, both to point out that this isn't just a spreadsheet and to get you a taste of some of the more interesting and fun things you can do with Coda. So in our last video, we started by creating a to-do list, and we've got it the priority as a lookup of the priority table below. And now I want to add an advanced feature that in some spreadsheets or databases wouldn't work. I'm going to say a column that a task is a subtask of another task. And I'm going to choose the column format as a lookup. And I'm going to enter a default value of none just to keep things straightforward. And the table I'm going to look up from is the same table. And so that's the part that shouldn't really work. You'll notice two things here. One is that the default value is entered automatically, even for the rows that were already there. And the second thing you'll notice is that when I click on it, it automatically gives me the values for my first column. Now that's not something you can change. Coda has a concept called the display column, and you see this little flag here, and you can change the display column, but whenever you do a lookup of a table, it's always going to default to that display column. But usually this will be pretty logical based on how you structure it. So if I select task 2 and I say that's a subtask of task 1, I now have those rows linked, and actually if I hover over task 1, it'll show me all the information about that task or that row of information. And then I can begin to do some advanced things such as grouping tasks by what they're a subtask of. And I'll show you more about grouping later because it's another really interesting, powerful feature. So I can see that my top level tasks are not a subtask of anything. Those are 1, 3, and 4. And things that are subtask of task 1 are task 2. And so I can very easily start sorting things. So I want to show you one last thing, ignoring the purpose of the subtask column for a moment. I'm just going to say that task 1, select task 1 as a lookup in this task 1 row, so it's basically looking up itself. Then I'm going to create a new column called equivalent, and I'm going to create a formula very similar to Excel. If task name, it's always going to assume that we're talking about the table we're in, though there is a way to reference outside tables. And if task name is equal to subtask of, then I'm going to say yes, otherwise I'm going to say no. And you'll notice that task 1 is not equal to task 1. And there's a reason for that, and it can be confusing, though there are ways around it. And that's because task 1 is a string, if you're familiar with programming and coding concepts, whereas task 1 in the subtask column is actually an object or a reference. And you can see when I hover over it, it kind of glows. And so that's why they're not equivalent. If I changed this to use the toText function on subtask of, then you'll notice that it changes. Now they're equivalent because I'm comparing text to text as opposed to trying to compare an object to text. So that'll make more sense when you see it in use in some more advanced use cases a little bit later on, but I just wanted to point out some of those caveats early on and some of those interesting features, and we've got a lot more to cover in future videos.